Great, thank you, Whitney. Welcome to the conversation on remote work for accounts receivable. My name's Matt Shanahan. Joining me today is Vicki Serdage. Vicki recently joined Lockstep as our CFO in 2019, December of 2019. And Lockstep is a fully remote organization. So recently, Vicki just went through the transition of joining the company and establishing an AR process for remote operations. So I thought it would be awesome to get her feedback and experience as it's very, very recent. So again, thank you for joining me, Vicki.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and jump in. You know, it wasn't that long ago that really remote work wasn't all that possible. And for the most reason, the technology just wasn't there. If you looked at home internet speeds over the last decade, so this is a chart from 2007 to 2017, you know, it's about 10-fold increase just on the ability to do internet connectivity at home. And that gets critical when you're talking about video conferencing and other things. The other thing is laptops weren't as prevalent. So if you look at device shipments over the last decade and what's projected into 2023, laptops will be the dominant category of devices. And that's primarily in the business world. So, you know, that continues to accelerate where the desktop continues to fall away. And there's whole new categories of software that didn't exist in 2010. When we think about, you know, Zoom that we're using today, Slack for instant messaging, these are all brand new companies and new categories of software. So a lot has been changing, including the fact that paper has gone into the cloud. So you can get a fully digital mail room almost overnight. All you have to do is change exactly where mail is being sent. It'll be scanned, loaded into the cloud, and then directly integrated into your back office. So integrated with SharePoint, integrated with Box, being able to connect it to your bank. Your entire mailroom, again, is in the cloud. So the ability to go remote has dramatically been changed by technology, but technology alone is not enough. Technology is an enabler. People and process are really what have to make it work. And people are really the most critical part to this. In order for remote work to actually work, an organization has to develop a remote culture. For example, when we launched Lockstep, we decided to go fully remote. And the first book we looked at was one called Remote, written by the founders of 37 Signals. It's a great book. It's a quick read, but it does go through a lot of the cultural elements. For instance, we made it mandatory that video cameras were on for any of our conference calls. We did daily stand-ups. There were a number of things. If people were meeting in one place, so let's say a group had gotten together, they would actually have to log into their own laptop so that the conversation for everybody would be through the device. So establishing that culture, how you work together is really important. I would recommend both of these books. The other good one is The Year Without Pants with a nice comical cover. And this does bring us to one of our first poll questions. We wanted to find out how many people have gone to work from home or remote work in the last month.
Look at those responses already.
It's interesting. Enough people were already remote workers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, some people are just moving into this transition.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So in addition to people, the second component of success is really around process. In moving AR or accounts receivable processes to a remote, there's 7 factors that we've identified that are important to address. And we wanted to share these with you. We also have started a blog series. So if you do have a chance, there's more detail on each of these steps in our blog series, and we'll be continuing to add to that. But the 7 steps that we had identified are, first of all, setting up the right infrastructure. And we'll talk about what's unique about accounts receivable as it pertains to that. How do you establish a productive work environment? Making sure you've connected with your team, especially around key processes. Utilizing a shared activity management system. So moving away from things like Excel or Outlook. Over communicating with your customers. How do you sort of get ahead of the curve and spend time with them? Making sure that you go 100% digital by moving customers online. And then how do you keep your stakeholders up to date? Because this is, you know, when you can't just walk down the hall, there's a lot of more reporting requirements that are needed. So what we'll do is we'll actually dig into each of these in a little more depth. And as I mentioned, we'll sort of lean on Vicki to share her experience of going through these steps. The first one is the right infrastructure. And we talked about, you know, a laptop, good internet, good collaboration software key. But I think what makes accounts receivable unique is, for instance, telephony. Telephony is important because your customers knew how to call you. It might have been a desk phone. And that desk phone is no longer being answered. So how can you connect that desk phone to your cell phone, right? And forward that information along. That's a key part of your process continuing to work. If customers can't get in touch with you, that's going to break what you're doing. The other is access to information. So there's a lot of, you know, ancillary information needed once you go into a remote process. And Vicki, maybe you could share some of your experience on that.
Well, I can share my experiences on all of these because it was just so recent. You know, one of the keys for accounts receivable, remote or not, is information. It is a constant struggle to get all the information that we need and have it where we need it. I think that when we start moving into a remote environment, that's a wonderful opportunity to get everything on the web, get everything in a shared system, and really embrace this new way of working. Many of us have been pushed into this new way of working, but now we can take advantage of this, and we can use resources like those you've articulated already, as well as Anytime Collect, as a platform to start really aggregating our data in a useful single location so that we have it when we need it, which has always been a struggle. And I think anyone else in accounts receivable will say that has been their struggle as well.
Great, thank you. The other is establishing a really productive work environment. Customers, everybody's expecting that we're all working from home today. This is my home environment. You can see this is where I'm presenting from right now. You can also see my little book of remote down there on the stack. So one of the things that's really important is establishing things like boundaries, creating quiet space, because you will be having those calls with customers and they want to feel that it's confidential. They also want it to be, not distracting, that you can focus on certain things. I mean, that's critical, again, representing that respect for the customer and really kind of putting things forward. Vicki just set up her office, and I thought maybe it'd be fun to hear what she had to say about that.
So I started setting up my office a week before Christmas, and I thought, I have older children. We can set it up in the dining room. It's a nice big surface, and that'll be perfectly fine for a few weeks. Well, I didn't take into consideration 2 dogs and a cat. So, not only was it people walking in and out that were distracting, but I also had happy little dogs that were at my feet at all times. And that just made it absolutely impossible to stay focused and stay on task. So I decided, where is the quietest room in the house? And that happened to be my daughter's room. So we made a deal, and I said, hey, I need that space. Let me move my office in there. You can take another room. And, for a few weeks, it was rough. As many of us who were moved into a remote workplace quickly, we all can feel it. It was rough, but it worked. It was quiet. And it takes time to get adjusted to these things. It takes time to get your space set up the way that you want it and learn all of these different techniques for communication. But they're very doable. They're very doable.
Great, thank you for sharing. So this is a picture of Tito, one of our marketing manager's dogs. I've heard Tito a couple of times. I think today he's in the basement just to make sure that things remain quiet. So one of our next poll questions, just kind of a fun one, is how many people have heard a dog bark during a call or video when you've been working remotely?
I will say that I absolutely love that. When I hear pets in the background,
That's a good, yeah, a lot of people. All right, thank you for sharing. The other important part is really connecting with your team. Teamwork is critical in any process, as we know, and it's easy to suddenly just focus on your own work and not necessarily connect with the rest of the team. We found it's really important to coordinate and share notes, especially starting the day with a huddle. You know, what happened yesterday? What are we expecting today? Did anybody see changes in what's happening with collections? Are there certain, you know, ways of engaging customers that are working better than others? We think of it as, you know, in some ways as your accounts receivable scrum. You know, development teams get together every day in what they call a scrum meeting, just to really kind of triage the day. And accounts receivable really should be going through its own scrum meeting on a daily basis, you know, to coordinate those activities of what's happening. And if you're working across different time zones, making sure you're overlapping, you know, the space between that, so that there's a way to be in synchronized, you know, activity with each other. Don't forget to leverage water cooler talk. That's important. You know, you're to stay a team, you've always got to be communicating not only about the work, but about your own lives, and that's important to do. The other really useful thing is it actually turns out to start to be easier to do lunch and learns. What we find is, you know, taking an hour where the first 30 minutes is just, you know, sort of roundtable, everybody talking, enjoying lunch, and then following up 30 minutes of, you know, training on a particular topic. And then, you know, we're seeing more and more people have the happy hour at the end of the week, where they just get a chance to, you know, sort of talk about the week that was and enjoy, you know, getting ready for the weekend.
I think that is brilliant. I think that is brilliant.
So, you know, there's a lot of good opportunities. Now, the other part that we've started to see, oh, I think we did have another poll question there, didn't we? Yes, how many people feel comfortable in front of the camera? We were interested in that. That was one of the things that was interesting for people to get used to.
Oh, I want to know that person, those people that say always, what are you doing that I need to do? Because it's taken some time and I'm still struggling. So I give you guys kudos.
All right. Yeah. So it looks like there's a good mix, about evenly spread between always, never, and reluctantly. So it gets easier over time.
It does.
So really, to have a strong process, it's important to have structured activities. And if you've been tracking those activities in Excel or Outlook historically, it gets harder to stay in sync from a remote perspective. Which activities need to be done today? For whom, you know, in which context? All of that gets harder and harder when you're in a remote situation. So having some sort of shared activity management system that everybody can see their assignments, the progress, you know, for the day can be tracked and kept up to date, and even simplifying, you know, management reporting. So how do we kind of share that information back and forth? You know, Vicki, I don't know if you want to kind of give your perspective on, you know, one of our customers.
I do, thank you. So we have customers in Ohio. I'm located in Ohio. We have one customer in particular that has 7 entities under the same corporate umbrella, and many of their customers are shared. They have a huge need to share data across all divisions and all the people because they share that customer base. All of a sudden, Ohio is under a stay-at-home order. So what do you do when you have to share information across 7 different companies with all your different accounts receivable team if you don't have structure in place? And this is something that is so critical for every organization, sharing that data, having that good, solid, strong communication. And that's one thing where they said they could not have been as effective and seamless in their transition as they are without any time clock. And I will also say, from my perspective, I've had people who've worked for me that have moved to other states, and it was amazing how we had no downtime. They were just able to pick up and go. It is amazing how the right tools and make you work effectively and efficiently anytime.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now, the current environment, the customers have their own challenges, and I think understanding those challenges is important to, keeping your own collections process in play. So for instance, customers are experiencing their own churn. If you're providing office services and some of the offices are closing, obviously that's going to have an impact. That also impacts, payments that they're receiving that they can pass along to you. Having that empathy and understanding is going to be critical throughout the entire process. But they will also have issues about going remote. So depending on how their documentation was set up, with whether it's statements of work, purchase, orders, or contracts that are placed, if they have difficulty getting access to that, or if their internal approval processes are now hampered because of remote, or things are being sent to a central location that they have access problems with. If they're missing supporting documentation, again, because it was sent to a different location or housed differently. Check approvals and signatures, if they were doing physical checks, becomes a challenge, right? All of these are issues that they're facing as well. And so understanding that and getting ahead of it and anticipating it becomes a critical success factor. And Vicki, maybe you could kind of walk us through your thought process on that.
Sure. I think that, now it's a unique time. Accounts receivable is always challenging. It is always a challenging field to go into and to stay in. So when we give ourselves another hurdle, we need to also give ourselves another tool, because realistically, this is a job that can be done extraordinarily well remotely with very little interruption or downtime if you have the right processes in place. And that's tools like you had identified, using Earth Class Mail to automate the deposits and collect the mail, constant communication, and just really identifying your needs and where you may see a hiccup in those needs, getting ahead of them. That's the key always, is to get ahead of them and identify.
And Vicki, can you comment on kind of the people aspect of the process?
Yes. So, this is still a people-to-people business, regardless of what industry you're in. You're dealing with a person, and we're all in this together. We're a team, regardless if you're a vendor or customer, we're a team. And I think that understanding that there's that human element to it, and we all need to be together on this, is absolutely imperative. We will get through this. We will. We need to just work together, and we need to be empathetic, like you indicated, and we need to be more flexible. This is the time when we are our brand. We are delivering what we say we're going to deliver, and our brand should always include being sympathetic and being empathetic and understanding that there's situations outside of one's control and being the solution to those problems. This is the time to use those tools to really be what you need.
It's interesting. We've been spending a lot of time with our customers, just strategizing with them on the challenges they're facing and seeing what kinds of solutions we can help with. And the feedback that we received is that the number one thing that they're trying to do to mitigate risk is to spend time with their customers, understand their customers, listen to their customers. That the biggest risk mitigator is conversation and communication. So it was striking to hear that from all of the customers.
Yep. That's something we had talked about earlier. The person who gets paid is always the person who leaves the best impression. You'll always pay the person who makes you feel good about doing business with them first. That's always going to be the priority.
It's also critical to make digital core to your process. So getting customers to move online means that you will, sort of get rid of the paper, not have to go into an office, all those kinds of things. And while you can put some of the paper into the cloud, the better thing is to really make it so that customers can be 100% self-service. Vicki, I don't know if you could comment on just kind of how you've seen transitioning people to online can be done.
So we always have early adopters, and we have those that are very hesitant to embrace online. I think that some of the tools that I use that are most effective is payment terms and mandating that we are using and communicating online and using payment portals and automating the payment process to get those things done, and also walking them through the steps. This is a good relationship builder because you're spending that time to explain how your system works, introduce the customer to it, finding out additional information about your customer, maybe specific needs that you didn't know about, and also getting them involved in your environment. The quicker they can navigate to your environment, the happier they're going to be, the more likely they're going to visit your environment, and it makes the whole process so much easier.
Absolutely. And the final step that we've really noticed is keeping your stakeholders up to date. There's been an increase of much more demand for information about collections and cash position and cash forecast. What might have been a once a week forecast is becoming a daily or twice daily activity. The entire C-suite is focused in on understanding cash and cash position. So that working capital and understanding those components has increased in importance. These are some of the key ways that you can stay focused on actually collecting cash versus just sending management reports up. One is to think about how you can automate emails regarding status so that an executive can receive an update in at the end of the day, every day. Integrate AR data with business intelligence. So make it so that the data can be sliced and diced any way that an executive wants. Also keep sales involved. Integrating AR activity data into the CRM means a salesperson can log into Salesforce, see the detail behind that customer, and know exactly how to engage at the right time. And then certainly providing access to any of the internal AR dashboards to others sort of breaks you away from having to do all that work yourself.
That's an excellent point. When we ask our frontline to design these reports for us, in management, we're taking them away from the critical frontline position where we need them to be customer facing, communicating, and really delivering that service in one-on-one quality discussion time with the customers that we need. So we can utilize these dashboards, deliver our own reports, and then find some additional supplemental data, or maybe find something that we weren't even looking for. Use these tools as they are intended. It really is empowering. It keeps our frontline people on the front line, and it keeps us all very productive.
And we did put up another poll question in case people didn't see it, just regarding, are you seeing an increase in requests for reporting?
That completely makes sense. And it takes time.
Yeah, so a little over almost 90% of people said yes, a big increase or somewhat of an increase. So we're definitely seeing a change there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 7 steps that we had identified for remote accounts receivable success. We hope you found them useful. As I mentioned, we do have a blog series on these to go in more detail, and we'll certainly have this recording available for you tomorrow. Just a reminder about Anytime Collect itself. It is designed to streamline the accounts receivable collections process. We do that 3 ways. One is automating those outbound communications, providing the online customer self-service that we talked about, and the collections activity management so that people can focus on the right next best activity. And this is a quote from one of our customers that came in this week. So this was an organization that had to move to fully remote just in the last 2 weeks. They had some very interesting stories that I can't share publicly, but they did say we could share this quote. And one of the things that they said is that, not being able to have that face-to-face time now, it's critical that they can go one place and see all the activity and know that the right things are happening. So with that, we will open it up for question and answer. And just as a reminder, if you would like to see a demo of Anytime Collect, you can register for one at our website.
If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, you can feel free to add those into the Q&A or chat bot, and I'll be moderating those. It looks like we just got one in, and it was, what if your customer has a PO requirement? How would that be handled?
Well, I can handle that. So one of the unique things about this system is it has triggers built in. So if you have a customer that requires a purchase order number to be included on their invoice, it will prompt you before the invoice is deployed to fill in that critical data so that you don't delay the invoice payment.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicki.
You're welcome.
And I think we actually got another one too. Yeah, here we go. How do you manage in a remote environment, and can you give any advice?
I can. So one of the things that I found is most helpful is communication. Always communicate. And when you first go into a remote environment, it's a little bit more difficult because you may feel like you're not there, so you're not part of a team, but you absolutely are. So use Slack or whatever IM tool you have. You know, we don't talk on the phone much anymore, but pick up the phone and call your teammates and ask for help if you need it, or just see how they're doing. Use the tools to socialize and stay in the fold and get the data that you need. That's critical. I do that every day. I'm constantly messaging people. If I need a contact or I had a question about something, I do not hesitate to message them.
Yeah, and I would add to that, you know, if you have an activity management system in there, it's going to be very visible as to, you know, who's performing really well and maybe who needs some assistance and some coaching. And so things become more transparent, and in some ways allows you to know exactly how to engage each of your team members to help them out.
That's actually a really good point. You know, when we have collection teams, we are going to have some that they're all stars. They can just get everything done. They need very little attention. They're very autonomous workers, and they are great. But we have some that may need a little more. They may need a little more direction. They may need more delegation of duties, more supervision. Overall, we need to monitor their success. Otherwise, we may have stagnant resources. Our superstar may be able to do a lot more work, and by not identifying where they have these gaps, we're not really doing them any justice or ourselves. So using a system like this where we can delegate, we can identify, and we can also monitor the overall productivity, critical to your success.
Great, thanks, Vicki.
Sure.
All right, well, it looks like we are just about out of time. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us again, and thank you, Matt and Vicki, for presenting today. As Matt mentioned, if you'd like any additional information, you can visit the URL on the screen here, or feel free to reach out to any of us. We're more than happy to chat with you. So thanks again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.
Have a great week.